One of the happiest days of my musical career life happened when I got my acceptance letter to Berklee College of Music. About a week later, that was followed by the saddest day in my musical career life when I realized I couldn't afford to go, even with student loans. So, that got me thinking now, here we are some 20 years later after my whole college thing. There were some other off and on moments in there, but this is me looking back and kind of throwing some ideas out there of, do you need to go to college for music? Let's check that out. Now before we get started, if you like these kinds of videos, remember, do the whole like and subscribe thing. I do music news on Mondays, although this week it's going to be on Wednesday because I decided to do this video first. But I also do reviews of sample libraries, mostly free things that you can find around the internet, sample libraries and certain plugins. I also go through the contact library, just playing around with that stuff. I'm going to have an ongoing series about my own composition projects. I'm currently working on a Star Trek fan film called Yorktown. I already have part 1 out. I'll put an I right there, so feel free to click on that. And also I want to note before we get started on all this, these are of course my opinion. Your mileage may vary. This is me speaking after going through my whole college career and actually not finishing college. Sorry that didn't work out, Mom and Dad. But looking back on it now, 20 years later, and just a little bit in my musical journey. So again, these are just my thoughts, my opinions. How you go about things may be completely different. I know other composers and musicians have done videos on this subject, so it's a good idea to go check out many of those, get a wide range of ideas, and make an informed decision for yourself. So I got to thinking, could you get a substantial music education nowadays without going to college? And I think with inventions like YouTube and various websites, blog posts, online opportunities, and even community college type settings, which I guess is still technically going to college, do you need the degree? So that's what I'm mostly putting in debate. I think education is very important. I think everybody should educate themselves in anything and everything that they have an interest in or that will be impactful to their life. But really, this comes down to, is a music degree worth it? So I think on its surface, for the most part, I would say no. If you're going into composition, especially for film and games, most of those places don't care if you have a degree. Some do, or they at least put it on there, but most don't care. If you want to be a performance major, or a performance artist, rather, then no, you just have to be very good at your instrument or singing or whatever your instrument is. So when do you need a music degree? I think if you're going into music therapy, then you certainly need a degree because it's sort of walks that same path of psychology and medical field, so you'll need a degree for that. If you want to be a college professor of music, then most universities want you to have at minimum a master's, and a lot of them want you to have a DMA, a Doctor of Musical Arts, or a PhD if you go into theory, music theory. And then if you want to be a K through 12 teacher, then you'll need a Bachelor of Music in Education degree. Some states or counties might have ways around that. You might just have to pass some sort of county test, but for the vast majority of them, you'll need a degree for that. So I started hunting online to see what kinds of things you could find. Now, I've already been watching tons of YouTube videos over the years, as I'm sure you guys have been too. So you already know that there's a ton of resources out there. So I decided to look up some instrumental studies. I'm a saxophone player, so could I learn saxophone online? Now, starting from scratch might be a little tricky, but I think a lot of us have a background where we started playing in band in high school, or in maybe elementary school, junior high, high school. So if you have those foundations, I think it'll be a lot easier to continue on. Starting from scratch might be a little more difficult, but it's doable. There's a wonderful YouTube channel called the Flute Channel where, I forget her name, but the nice lady goes over techniques on performance techniques and etudes and things like that. And then there's also a saxophone channel called, I think it's called Better Sax or Everyday Sax. I'm blanking on the name of that too. I'm going to put links to these down below so you can go check those out if they interest you, or at least get an idea of how such a thing can work. Now, the upside to these is there's a lot of teaching and training that goes on in them, so you can learn a lot. The downside to them is they've got to pay the bills, so a lot of their videos are also, I review the cheapest flute I can find on Amazon. I review the cheapest saxophone. Stuff that's not really technique. You still learn some stuff in their fun videos, but so you might have to wade through that. And then there's also, I found one on electric guitar because that's something I've actually been thinking about picking up, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to go about classroom style lessons or if I could learn some stuff online. And I found Marty Music, who has an entire series labeled Beginning Lesson 1, Lesson 2, and so on, so you can learn how to play electric guitar through that. And what's more is on the saxophone channel, there's a video of Jaleel Shah from the Manhattan School of Music giving a master class. Now again, this isn't quite the same as one-on-one, but he's going over breathing exercises, scales, and technique. And he's from the Manhattan School of Music. For those interested, the Manhattan School of Music costs nearly $70,000 a year to go, so about $35,000 a semester. When all is said and done, you're out $250,000, or you owe that in loans. School that I'm associated with, Berklee College of Music, costs $65,000 a year. Now you compare that to some other schools that I'm associated with. The University of Kansas costs $26,500 a year. And the University of Alaska Fairbanks is about $20,000 a year. But you can also petition, I'll get into this later, to pay in-state tuition, which is $6,600 a year, a lot more affordable. Now, Fairbanks, Alaska might not be at the top of everybody's list to go to college, namely because of this right here, and it is a trip. I tell you, I grew up in the Anchorage area, but where it gets cold in Anchorage, but my first semester, I started in the spring semester, so I got up there in January. I couldn't see campus for the first 2 weeks because of a little phenomenon called ice fog. That, and you only have about 4 hours a day late. But that's a whole other story. Maybe I'll get into in another video. So anyways, and if you're paying out-of-state tuition, then $20,000 a year is still a hefty price, especially when you consider living in Alaska has a high cost of living. It's expensive to get there. It's expensive to get out. You're probably living on campus. I would recommend that, especially when trying to get to and from class when it is 50 below. Run, basically. But it's expensive. So that ends up not working out to be quite as cheap. But one thing you can do, because I had a few friends that did this, is you can actually petition the school for in-state tuition. So instead of $20,000 a year, he ended up only paying about $6,600 a year. And of course, this was almost 20 years ago, so it was probably even less then. But still, less than a third of the price. So not a bad way to go about it. So basically the way he did it is UAF has a small music department, but they try to have a full band and a full jazz band and basically full everything. And we were lacking saxophones. I was one of 2 saxophones my first year there, and then I was one of 3 saxophones after my buddy Aaron got there. And so he said, hey, I'll come study there, but I can't afford $20,000 a year. You need saxophones. How about we work out some deal with a scholarship or cheaper tuition? And they said, okay, we'll grant you in-state tuition. Now, schools that are considered inexpensive, like University of Nevada, Las Vegas, or University of Kansas, like I mentioned, they're not exactly hurting for students, so that might not work there. But what I recommend is if you're interested in a school, give the department head a call or the professor of music in the area that you're interested in and say, how are your student numbers doing? Do you think I could petition the school to get in-state tuition or some sort of financial help? And if they're lacking in a certain instrument, that teacher might be very, very prone to help you out because their job could be on the line because positions are cut when they don't fill in classes because they don't have enough students. So it's a little food for thought. Again, you might have trouble at some of the bigger schools. University of Kansas is a giant school with it's a big basketball school. So they're not hurting for students, and it was a school of music, not a department of music. But maybe some smaller state schools, maybe Minnesota, maybe Maine, not exactly schools that kids are busting to go to. Most of the time they want to go to warm places, not, the frozen north. But certainly try that out at UAF if you don't mind living in Fairbanks, Alaska for a few years. Okay, so back to some other resources I found just on YouTube. If you want to learn music theory and music business, check out Adam Neely. He does some in-depth, crazy music theory stuff. He also talks about his life as a gigging musician in New York. He also went to Berklee and I believe Manhattan School of Music. So he has a lot of insight on that. I believe he also has a video of if music school is worth it. Check his stuff out. He went a lot further than I did. He got his bachelor's in Berklee and his master's, I believe, at Manhattan School of Music. So he has a ton of insight. His channel's a blast anyway. He goes a lot into what I would consider 20th century music theory. Crazy weird time signatures, tuplets. The stuff's a blast. It's fun to watch. So go check his stuff out. And Rick Beato talks about anything and everything in music. He's a wizard at music theory, from the basics to advanced stuff, and more traditional theory than what Adam Neely goes into. But Rick knows his stuff too. He can go into some bizarre stuff. But he brings that all from a standpoint of a veteran music producer. I believe he's in Atlanta. He also has a lot of friends that are legitimate touring and gigging musicians that he brings on to talk about their journey, their path, their experiences in the business. His channel is awesome. Go check him out. I'm sure if you found my tiny little channel, you already know about his, but if not, go find his. Again, I'm going to put links to all this stuff down below. So here's some ideas I wish existed when I was heading into college back in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Kind of had a few false starts there. Or things that I had even thought of. I'm sure these were floated by to me from peers and from teachers, but it's stuff that never crossed my mind. You come out of high school and you were just raring to go, whether that's an in-state college. A lot of us want to get away. I had to go in-state, which was a good thing. I certainly wasn't ready to go off on my own that young, so it was a blessing in disguise. But even just going up to Fairbanks gave me a little bit of that independence that I think students need, and it didn't break the bank. But there's some things I wish I had thought of or I wish existed. So for many people who pursue music as a career, a degree has no bearing on their success. Like I said before, unless you want to be a K through 12 teacher, a college professor, or go into music therapy, you really don't need the degree. If you are all in on going to school, I recommend studying something else, like a business, especially if you want to pursue performance or composition. You can be your own business manager. You'll know how to write up contracts. If you live somewhere that has a law school, Alaska doesn't have a law school, so you'd have to go out of state. Maybe study law. Even if you don't become a lawyer, take those as elective classes if you're able to, at least intro to law. That would be a huge benefit, especially as a composer when reading over contracts. Save yourself a couple $100 for a consultation anyway when you're trying to have a lawyer look over a contract. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that teaching at the college level usually requires a higher degree, but there are some caveats. So if you'll see this a lot at Berklee, is you can have a bachelor's degree, although some of the teachers don't have any college degree, but they can get what they call DMA level experience. Again, that's Doctor of Musical Arts level experience. These are people that went out, they're touring musicians, they have either decided to stop touring, or they take a semester off to teach, or they are working film composers, working game composers who also teach from the Boston area. So they have that life experience. They basically already do what a doctorate is setting them up to do. So that's how they can get away with that. If you're from a family that can afford it and is on board with you studying music, or you already personally have made the money, or you get the scholarships or grants, then go nuts, go to school, why not? Unless you have other ways to go and make money now, getting an education isn't a bad thing. Again, I don't think the degree is worth it, but if it's already paid for or you have the disposable income, then who am I to say don't go do that? And again, your mileage may vary in all this. So most of what I'm going to say here will apply to people that are going to a more affordable college and paying in-state tuition than people looking to go to the ones that end up costing you $250,000 when all is said and done. I'm mulled over whether or not I should say this, but I'm going to say it, and I stand by it, 99.9% anyway. But there is nothing in music you can't learn online or in books. And I think that's a true statement nowadays. There's a reason that I always link to books that I've bought and read and studied myself down in the description. By the way, there are links to books down in the description. Go check those out if you're interested in things like film scoring, game scoring, and some other topics that whatever I found that week that I said, oh, I should link to that. So one day I decided I wanted to learn how to mix East-West strings and Cinesample strings. Those are the two libraries I use the most, mainly East-West, but I also use Cinesamples. I wanted to get a better cinematic music sound, less muddy, more room, all that stuff, that dream that every composer always chases, that perfect sound. So I went and I looked up videos, and I found videos that taught me how to do exactly those things. How to mix East-West strings in Cubase, how to mix Cinesample strings and brass and everything else in Cubase. So it was there. It took me 5 minutes of searching and then maybe a couple hours of looking through the various videos to pick out the tidbits of information that I found useful. But it was there for free, probably at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I'm usually researching this kind of stuff. So I didn't have to wait until 8 a.m. on Friday and pay thousands of dollars to go learn to do that. It was right then, real time, learn how to do it, cost me nothing. Another time I needed to tweak some of the ways I worked in Cubase, and I decided to go ahead and spring a little bit of money, about $120 for a course at ThinkSpace Online. That's Guy Micklemore stuff. I talk about him a lot on this. That's another channel you guys should go check out. Brilliant guy, fun to watch, a lot of good information. But anyways, I wanted to know how to not just build a template in Cubase, I already had one, but I wanted to optimize it, get the stems right, even though you guys see in my videos, I never use a template. I always just do a whole MIDI dump into the thing anyway. But anyways, I needed to learn it for my master template. So I spent $120 and went and downloaded his course. And so the $120 is nothing when you compare it to the Cubase course at Berklee Online, which is $1,500. Granted, the Berklee course is more in depth, but that's kind of my point. I didn't need the full compose music in Cubase course. I just needed some info on how to build a template and how to optimize that in Cubase. I didn't need all the other information. If you really don't have $1,500 to spend or even $100 to spend, you could easily have found all that information online on YouTube or other free websites. But the $100 was really for the convenience of having all the information there presented in a point A, point B, point C, manner. And the Berklee $1,500 price tag is that high because you're also getting college credit for it. I think it's $1,200 to do non-credit. So if you're already springing $1,200, might as well save up the extra $300, get some college credit for it too, just in the off chance you do decide to pursue a degree. You'll have it there. So if you're flat broke or don't want to take out loans for a music degree, you can learn a ton of information online for free. It might not be as structured or as easy to ask questions in a classroom type setting or bounce ideas off of other people, but the information is out there. If you do that, then I would say spend any money that you can afford on your instrument, keeping it up to shape, keeping, reeds if you're a saxophonist, keeping it tuned up, or keeping your music studio as optimized as you can within your budget. Speaking of which, there's a lot of that stuff out there for free too. Music samples and plugins. I do videos on those. Link right there. Little shameless plug there. Sorry about that. Bear with me. So some other ideas, if you want to be a little more thrifty about it, but can't afford to spend some cash, you can look into local colleges that are in that $4,000 to $6,000 a year range and take the bulk of your undergrad classes there and knock out music history, ear training, and music theory. These classes are universal, so you're getting the same information whether you pay $100 for the class or $10,000 for the class. A plagal cadence is the same at the University of Kansas as it is at the Manhattan School of Music. Plagal cadence is a plagal cadence. Once you've knocked out that stuff and you still want to pursue a music degree, you can either keep going there at a lesser charge, or at that point you can transfer into one of the more designer schools or prestigious schools, aka more expensive schools, and you can study with the teachers that you want to study with, and you're only taking the classes that would truly be different in a Berklee or Manhattan setting versus a University of Kansas or University of Alaska Fairbanks setting. If I sound a little negative towards the more prestigious, expensive schools, I don't mean to be. My point of all this is to say that if you can't afford to go, you can find all the information online. If you can afford a little bit, or you want to be a little more frugal with your money, you can do it a lot cheaper than paying, $60,000 a year. While I still don't think you need the expensive music degree, if you can't afford to go, even just for a little bit, there is some good that can come from it. Actually, quite a bit of good can come even from one semester. Berklee and Manhattan School of Music are going to have top-of-the-line, industry-used, current equipment, and a smaller, less expensive school is probably going to have cheaper, older, and probably out-of-date stuff. You're likely to make better connections within the music industry at Berklee, UCLA, Manhattan, etc., than you are at somewhere like the University of Nevada, University of Kansas, and certainly better than you can find at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. For one, the pool of students and teachers is much broader. That whole cast a wide net thing really applies. And the skill level of the students, it's higher at those schools. It just is. That's not to say you can't have some sort of wunderkind or just exceptional, brilliant composer at those schools, but that's going to be a small handful of students out of hundreds or possibly a few thousand students. But at a school like Berklee, it's nearly every student that is just mind-boggling good. And I come to this reasoning based on the audition and acceptance policy of the schools I've attended. University of Alaska Fairbanks, I applied, I wrote a check, and as soon as it cleared, I was accepted. And I was a mediocre C student in high school, so that had no bearing. They're really just, like I said, the music departments at some of these smaller schools, they just want the bodies. At Berklee, I had to apply, get invited to audition, fly to Boston, and go through an audition process that included ear training exercises, rhythm exercises, blues scales improvisation, sight reading, and finally performing a prepared piece for 3 professors. After that, I had to meet with a 4th professor to talk about my plans for school and after school, and submit a CD of music I had composed so I could be considered for the film scoring program. Then I had to wait 3 weeks for the decision. Another benefit of some of the more prestigious schools is you're going to have professors that are likely to be well-known names. A few years ago, you could study saxophone with Branford Marsalis at Juilliard, and today you could study film scoring with Sean McMahon or Richard Davis, the man who literally wrote the book on film composing at Berklee. And that's not meant to be a knock at professors at the less expensive schools. I had some brilliant teachers at the University of Kansas and at UAF, but with named teachers comes connections to the industry. Most college professors' connections are going to be academic, but these more niche specialty schools, the connections are going to be industry connections. Another option for studying is by attending classes through online programs at colleges. Virtually every school has online classes now, and many schools have full online degrees you can work towards. And I'm not just talking about University of Phoenix Online, I'm talking about how schools like Berklee College of Music have a complete online program. Actually, the University of Alaska has a complete online program. And I hate to keep beating this drum, but I still don't think you need a degree in music. But I mentioned online degrees to get across that you have many options and that the information is out there in varying degrees of expense, from really expensive to free. It's out there. So the downside here to online degrees is there seems to still be a taboo that comes with them. I think it's better than what it was a few years ago, but online degrees still seem to have that perceived lesser quality to them. I think businesses have come around on that, but socially speaking, as soon as you mention that you went to the University of XYZ online, enthusiasm for the school seems to wane a bit. And from personal experience, full disclosure, my association with Berklee College of Music, I auditioned, I was accepted, I couldn't attend in person, I took classes online. So my association is with Berklee College of Music online. And maybe it's just a pride thing, I don't know, but it does sting a little bit when I talk to somebody and I say, oh, I've taken classes at Berklee, and they will say something like, oh, how did you like living in Boston? And then you have to say, well, I did it online. It's like you can see the look in their eye of going, oh, I think that's just my own ego talking, my own bias there, but hopefully it's better, or hopefully it gets better. And with what's going on in the world nowadays, where schools are quickly having to restructure how they do stuff, maybe in a few years, most degrees will be pursued online, or most education anyway will be pursued online, and the whole stigma will finally go away. And another downside to a degree at an online college is that you might not be able to get the exact named degree that you want. For instance, at Berklee College of Music, you can earn a Bachelor of Music in Film Scoring. That's what it'll say on your degree. But at Berklee Online, you earn a Bachelor of Professional Studies with emphasis in composition for film, TV, and games. So it's differently worded. When comparing the two classes, there are some differences, but not as many as you'd think. You still get a lot of the same coursework. It's just tweaked a bit. And of course, you don't have access to recording with live musicians for your film scoring projects. There's not, if you attend Berklee in person, they have a deal with a film school there in Boston where they pair up the directors with a composition student and you score their picture. That's both of your final semester projects. So you don't quite get that. Well, hopefully you found this useful. This is a bit of a long one. I was trying to aim for that 10-minute mark, and I think this one, after I edit it, it's going to be closer to a half hour, so I apologize for that. But there's a lot of information I wanted to throw out there. Again, any links I've mentioned are down below, including links to the books I was talking about earlier if you want to go check those out for further reading and independent study. I do these videos, I try to do at least 3 a week, some weeks only 2 times a week, like last week. I'm busy, folks. I'm trying to move. Apologize if this video was a little echoey. I am in the process of moving from upstate South Carolina to the Dallas area, so everything's moved out of this room, so it is extra echoey. So I apologize for that. But I hope you found this information useful. If you did, remember to do the whole like, subscribe thing, and we will see you on the next one.